This is the ripple effect of well-being in work and life. I'm Dr. Ken Thompson, here with Dr. Stepahnie Romero.
On this show, we explore how holistic well-being practices can transform our individual lives and our collective capacity for care.
We're bringing you the science, the stories, and the specific practices that reduce stress and build resilience in our homes, our offices, and our communities.
We're talking to people to see how their perspectives, practices, and work are creating a ripple effect for a better world.
Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to part 2 of this conversation between Dawn Lehman and Dr. Stepahnie Romero. In this episode, Dawn and Stepahnie discuss the birth of Awaken Pittsburgh, overcoming nonprofit challenges, and the evolution of healing.
So I decided to write my dissertation on it so that I could have the time and space to dive deep, and that was like 2012, 2013, and had a sabbatical. So during that time is when I taught the Path of Freedom in the jail while I was on sabbatical. I did a ton of research and dove really deep. Was still doing We Peace with Michelle. And then after I finished the dissertation, defended, and got my degree, my original intention, because my doctorate's in education leadership, was running schools. So I was like trained to run a thing, to do a thing. And I had gone to my administrators and said, I'd like to do this more widespread than just in my classroom. I'd like to offer something to the whole school or to the whole district. And they were like, it's really lovely that you're doing that in your classroom, Stepahnie, but we're doing STEAM. We're not doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, I talked to some other kind of superintendent kinds of people that I knew in my study group and doctorate work. And they were all like, wow, your dissertation is really amazing, wonderful work. No, we're really not doing that in our school or our district. That was the response that I was getting. And so I was like, how do I be in my authenticity of what I know is helpful for kids now, right? How do I, and also what's in my heart, how do I do that now that I have this degree and knowing what I know now and just feeling what I feel? And so I suddenly said to myself, I think I need to start a nonprofit. Yeah. And that's how it happened.
Mm-hmm. That's where it all began. Yeah, beautiful. So you had lots that was leading up to this transition. And I'm gonna just assume, correct me if I'm wrong, you had never started a nonprofit before. And
No, I never did that.
So you had these teachings and courage propelling you toward what this calling toward authenticity was and wanting to share it. And so this big shift happened. What, if anything, do you want to share about those early days of starting an organization and taking that leap?
Like everything, I think if I really knew what I was getting myself into fully, I might not have done it. I had no idea, honestly. But I was really blessed because, so I just started talking to people like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? Like, am I crazy? Is this something that could work? Like, how do I do it? I just started trying to get information. Like all of 2025, I think I spent talking to people about what I could or should do, right? If it was even plausible. And also like dealing with the fact that my husband was like, what are you doing? Because I was teaching in a very high paying district. Public school benefits are amazing. Retirement is amazing. Like my husband was like, you're going to give all of that up. Right. And it impacted my family because I had our insurance because the insurance was so much better through my school district. So it was actually like a huge decision. But there was something in me that I was just like, I have to do this. I absolutely have to do this. And my husband begrudgingly at first was just like, I see this is really what you want to do, you know.
Yeah.
But basically there were a couple of folks who were Sangha members with me at Shambhala who had either started a nonprofit or worked in nonprofit that were like, we'll help you, right? Uh, Reese and Danae in particular. So thank you if you're listening. And we started meeting like once a month or something. I don't even remember. And then just talking me through like, how do you do a business plan? What's the landscape? How do you do a landscape analysis? Um, Danae, I think, introduced me to New Sun Rising, which is a local org that supports people who want to start nonprofits. And they were so lovely to me. Brian and Scott over there, two brothers that had started it. And one of them in particular is actually a school teacher. He's not as involved in the nonprofit anymore, and sat with us and like asked me the hard questions like, why a nonprofit? Why do you want to do this? Why not another structure? And, like we really talked it through. And so I spent 2025 doing all of that work of really like, is this really a thing? Can I do it? And then um, by Thanksgiving of that year, I was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And so Danae and so in PA, what you do is you set up a corporation. And then once you get your corporation all set up, then you can file for 501c3 status. So you don't start with a nonprofit, you start with a corporation. So I filed for the corporation in November of 2025. So Awaken Pittsburgh technically was birthed in November of 2025. But we didn't become a nonprofit until summer of 2026. And so that fall of 2025, I decided that that's what I was going to do. I resigned from my position. I taught the rest of that school year through June of 2026. And then the other thing that was going on is there was a new expedited process for getting your 501c3, because I had heard these horror stories from people like, you file for your 501c3 and it's like months and months and months and months before you ever get it. And so I said, and somebody along the way said, they're going to do this new expedited process and it kicks in on July 1st. It's cheaper, it's quicker, the whole thing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to wait till July 1st, which is perfect because I stopped teaching in June. So I sent it in July, like early July. And I remember people were like, it'll be months before you have anything back. It was 1 week. 1 week.
Oh my goodness.
1 week. I sent the paperwork in and I got the 501c3 permission back in a week. Like, I don't know if nobody else filed on the expedited way, like I was the first one. I don't know.
There you were.
Mhm.
It's definitely, there's something you said that's sticking in my mind here, because it's so clear you had the vision, you had the knowledge, you had the experience, and what you didn't have within the school was the support from the systems. And you said you had talked with some other people who said kind of, thanks, but no thanks. We got our own thing going. So you were really holding this vision on your own, believing, knowing that it was important for the world. When did you first to get signs that there might be takers for this, that you might not just be pushing out an idea, but that there are partners out there that need this and see it, that would be working with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not sure that I was actually I don't want to use the word smart enough, but I don't know that I actually when we did the landscape analysis, which Reese helped me with, it was clear that there was no one else in the greater Pittsburgh area doing this particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's one. And so I was like, okay, no one's doing it. There's no other Awaken out there. And I just felt in my bones the need that teachers and students had,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? That I felt. I think my ignorance or hubris, I don't know what it was, that, well, if their need is there and I have a way to fill it, people are going to just do it, like people will buy it or accept it or bring it in. I think there was something about that there. And doing all the research for my dissertation, schools all over the country and world were already doing it. So like there were models, there were examples, right? And so I don't think I had any local people that were like, yes, we're going to do it. But when I started talking to people about it, they were like, it's so needed. Right? It's so needed. And I had these other examples from and so part of what I did when I wrote my dissertation that year of sabbatical is I traveled and actually visited schools and sat through classes where it was going on because I wanted to see it. I didn't want to just read about it. I wanted to like experience it. I also did like a couple of like mindfulness and education conferences, retreats, like I immersed myself fully in what was happening around the world in this space. So I had this confidence that it's possible. People are doing it. It's successful. There's all this brain research that shows us the changes that are actually happening. But I don't think I actually had any local, like, oh, these people are going to do it. I just had some kind of confidence that it would happen.
Yeah, and an innate connection with the value of it and trusting that the need is there, the value is there, it'll happen. So I'd love to hear more about the shaping then of Awaken's work. We know we've expanded to lots of groups. Early on, the focus was education and not just working with students, but working with the adults who work with students and designing your own curriculum. Awaken's curriculum, different than .B and others that you had experienced. Tell us a little bit about how that came together.
So I also early, like at the very beginning, it might have been 2025 while I was trying to set everything up. I I found a curriculum for teachers called Care for Teachers. That Patricia Jennings, Mark Greenberg, and Krista Turksma were working on. It came out of Penn State. The research was compelling. It's so well put together. I really, the more I read about it, wanted to know about it. And since Krista, who's a trainer, was at Penn State, I just reached out to her and I was like, hi, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to do. Can we get someone to do some training here in Pittsburgh? And she was like, I'll come. I will come. And she's like, get a group of X number of people together and I'll come. And I was like, okay, let me work on it. I'll see if I can and we picked some dates and the Shambhala Center agreed to host it. And her, because they had like a bedroom and a kitchenette space there so that they could host people who were teaching. So I set that all up and I started recruiting people and all the Peace teachers and other teachers that I knew were interested. And I ended up with like, I don't know, a small group of maybe 8-10 people. And we brought Krista and we all got trained in Care for Teachers. And as I set up the nonprofit and got my first board and started trying to decide what to do, Care for Teachers, they were very rigid. Like if we used their curriculum, they had a set price for delivering that curriculum that went to them. Like, so we couldn't really afford to deliver it and still run the organization. So I really wanted to use that curriculum, but it became clear to me that that was not going to be sustainable. So we actually had to design our own curriculum. Now, my doctorate is partly in curriculum design and supervision. I've spent many years designing curriculum, both at the middle school, high school levels and college, like for adults. So prior to being a K-12 educator, I always joke and say I did my career backwards. I actually, out of my master's, was hired to be an administrative faculty, which meant that I was designing and supervising curriculum for English as a second language learners at Pitt. And so, I feel like my whole life has brought me to this job. You know what I mean? Like everything that I've done in my past life has brought me to this job and like made me able to do it. Although I'm not like I'm lacking I feel that I'm lacking some of the like training to be a director, CFO, like that kind of training, the business end, like I'm lacking that. I would love to have someone be my business person and be free to do the other things that I do. But in regards to curriculum, I felt comfortable designing curriculum. And so I said, okay, I can't use CARE. That's their thing. I'm not going to steal that. That's not cool. What can I do? And I remembered that one of the conferences I was at, there was a research study that was done on the impact of mindfulness, and it used a workbook called the Mindfulness-Based Emotional Balance Workbook as part of a curriculum that they designed, that they tested and found like big impact on people's health and well-being, stress level, etc. So I said, well, I remember that. Let me get that book. Actually, I think I had bought it because there was like a vendor that was selling them at the conference. You know how they always have tables where they're selling stuff that's being talked about. And I think I had bought it. So I was like, let me look back at that workbook. Let me read that and see if we could base a curriculum on that. And at the same time, I had delivered Path of Freedom, and I really, really loved that curriculum. But that was meant for incarcerated people. And so that curriculum didn't feel right for me either. So I took everything that I knew about all my trainings, which at this point was .B, Path of Freedom, Care for Teachers, and I was trained to facilitate all these mindfulness curricula, all the research that I had done up to that point about what was helpful, right? And then I based all of that in combination with this mindfulness-based emotional balance workbook that had such great research results. Robert Roser, I think, was the researcher that, if I'm remembering correctly, that had used it in his work. And I just sat down actually with Carrie McCann, who was one of my first co-collaborators on this project. And we decided we would just try it. And so I wrote the curriculum. Carrie helped. And then I said, okay, we got to pilot it. We got to try it out. And so we just posted around. I don't even remember how we found people. I think Michelle King at that time posted it at Environmental Charter School, and we got like 4 or 5 people from Environmental Charter School, a bunch of other places we posted it out, and we got a group of maybe 8 people to do our first helping professional, because it was a group of varied helping professionals, our first helping professional / educator group, and piloted it, and people loved it. They really loved it. So that was the first curriculum. Yeah.
The first of many deliveries and many iterations of this evolving work. So as we come up on 10 years and you reflect back on this time, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you, and what have you learned through those?
So there's like different levels of challenges, right? So like the challenge in bringing our work to others is always time and money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like someone who has interest, because if someone's not interested, forget it, right?
Right.
Someone who has interest in what we're doing, they either, well, I'll just put it this way. A lot of times someone will say, yes, my staff is really stressed. Yes, we really see that this could be something that could help us. And I have 1 hour next Friday for you to come and do the thing. That's it. That's all we can fit. And, I totally appreciate and understand that. And it's a little demoralizing, though, for me, because I know from all the research, I can't change much in an hour. Now, I don't want to diminish that, because we might go in and do that hour presentation and plant a seed that blossoms into something wonderful for a human being, right?
That's right.
But for us, and the research we do in our programming, I know in my bones that unless I get 8 1.5-hour sessions at the minimum, right? I don't see statistical significance in the changes that we might be able to affect on levels of stress, burnout, compassion fatigue, indicators of mindfulness, health and well-being. Like we just don't see it, right? And so that's time. And then the money thing is like we live in a capitalist society. Everything gets monetized. And so we can't operate like a religious organization where people are just donating their time and energy to do the greater good. And in a way, like I don't even want that because there's a level of professionalism that we want to have in our program delivery that we can only guarantee when we have people who are trained, deeply qualified, invested in it for the long haul, that kind of a thing. So we have to pay people for delivering this work. We have to support them in their lives, right? And we want to be doing that. So that means that we have to charge for programming or find grants to support our programming, and it's very, very challenging in a culture where what we do may not always be valued, honestly, by foundations, by government, the people philanthropists that might be funding this. And that's the way nonprofits are set up in our country. So it's a bit of a conundrum.
Indeed. And takes me back to that leap of faith you made starting this organization, leaving behind a position with lots of security and really following your internal leading that this is something you needed to do. What in these last 10 years has affirmed that decision for you?
I mean, I think when I get an email from someone that tells me it changed their life, like, that's it. So I'll just give you an example. There was a person in that very first class who you know, but I won't name, who was suffering stress headaches, debilitating stress headaches, like not just a headache, like debilitating stress headaches, who after beginning to practice did not have any headaches anymore.
Amazing.
Right? That's the kind of thing, right?
That's right.
That's it. That's why I was doing it.
right.
That's why I started this. That's and you know, the hope is that people who are turned on to practice in this way, which is a very specific way, like, so we haven't talked about it, but I talked about my path as a Buddhist. I'm bringing practices to people in a very secular way, right? Very secular way. Awaken Pittsburgh is totally secular. And the reason is because not everybody's going to go to a Buddhist meditation center. That path is not for everyone. That's such a narrow thing. People want to have their own, and we have had people of every religious background come. And I've had a veiled Muslim woman, a Russian Orthodox woman, a Jewish woman, all come to me after taking our courses and say, this has deepened my own spirituality.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Which is amazing. And so it's things like that where we are not just, I don't know, meditating together. We're helping people connect with their deeper self, with their heart and their mind, and shifting that thing that the modern world does where it takes us out of ourself continuously, right? Where the busyness, the apps and everything vying for our attention, right? Where we pause from all of that and say, I'm a human being here right now. With the heart, with the mind, with some people might use the word soul. and I can be in relationship with myself. We're helping people take that pause. And I just think it's so needed. So I think that's what keeps me going, right? Because I need it.
That's right. I was thinking exactly that same thing. Don't we all want to live in a world where the other human beings around us are present and authentic? Mm-hmm. Yes. Beautiful. Well, I think we may be running near the end of our time. So maybe just a broad question and invite you to do some reflecting on these last 15 years and where that positions Awaken Pittsburgh for the future. So when you think about the landscape of Pittsburgh and society at large, uh, where do you see the greatest needs and where do you see this work heading? We didn't even talk about the ways the work has expanded. We
Yeah.
referenced reaching lots of different audiences,
Yeah.
certainly in this last year, even with the trauma resiliency protocol, with integrative community therapy. We're moving into some broader work. Where are we headed, Stephanie?
So one thing that I have been learning as we've been doing this work is, well, a couple of things I've been learning. You named trauma resiliency protocol. So one thing that I've learned, even in myself, is that when we have a trauma, it often is so overwhelming to our nervous system that asking someone in that trauma experience to sit and be still is harmful,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And so we need to support people healing the trauma before they'll ever be able to just sit and be still. And so that's one of the reasons we started looking at what's out there, what's available, and the trauma resiliency protocol came to the surface through the work we were doing with first responders and veterans. And I love Dan Jarvis greatly, and my hope is that folks can take advantage of that availability through us or some other way, or whatever trauma healing process they have, because trauma the impact of trauma, PTSD, um, is so great in our nervous systems that some of these other modalities that we've been trying to teach just aren't going to work, right? And so I think it's naive of us to say, which I think I was saying in the beginning, meditate, mindfulness, it's wonderful, right? Because it was for me. But if our system is overwhelmed, it's not going to work. And I'll just give you my own personal experience of that. I referenced Shambhala a lot in this conversation. There was clerical sexual abuse that happened in the Shambhala community that rocked that community, partly because of that and the pandemic. That center, even in Pittsburgh, closed. Centers across the world closed. I lost my practice for a good year or two in the middle of that. I could not sit, right? My regular practice was completely disrupted. And it was the trauma of what happened to my community that made it impossible for me to just be still with myself because I was in such grief and hurt. I had to heal from that to find my way back to practice, which gratefully I'm back in my regular, well, it's a different practice than what it was, but I'm back in a regular rhythm and deeply connected and joyful in my practice again. But it took a couple of years, and I was doing other modalities of practice to work with my heart and mind and different things. I did therapy to help me work through what happened, and a bunch of other stuff. But I have that lived body experience of trauma disrupting my practice, and I understand on a visceral level that when we are in that activated state, it's sometimes impossible to practice. So that's trauma resiliency protocol, and that's part of the inspiration for me bringing it, right? Is my own self experience and then witnessing the same thing in others, right? Witnessing that same thing in others. And then the other piece that I realized is, as a meditation instructor, and I just use this gentleman that I was working with, he said to me literally in an interview one-on-one that I was having with him, when I get really stressed or nervous, I just breathe it away. I get into my breathing and it goes away. And that is spiritual bypassing. That is avoidance. That is regulating the physical nervous system to avoid the emotional content. The way that he was using it, right? What I understood from what he was saying. If we're using an individual mindfulness practice to numb out and not sit fully with emotion and be in relationship with ourselves and others, it's not helpful. It's not helpful. So after hearing this and seeing this for quite a while, there started to be some conversations in my mind around how do we then kind of help people test? I don't know, that's not the right word. Be in relationship with other people and see that actually their practice is bearing fruit in the way they hold space with others. Because if it's not doing that, you're not doing it. You're not helping anything, you're just numbing, right? You could do the same thing with having a drink, right? Or using drug, like you're using a practice that can calm the nervous system to avoid as opposed to be with the difficulty. And the Resma Menachem talks about clean pain and dirty pain. Dirty pain is doing things to avoid feeling the pain that might cause more pain, right? And clean pain is it hurts to sit with the difficult stuff, but eventually you're going to help yourself heal, right? It's not exactly the same thing, but it popped into my mind. But so this idea that we have to find a way to bring in the relational aspect. We have to find a way to actually hold space for people to name what's going on and build resilience. That's not just, I'm going to get a technique to help mask or numb or settle the emotional state. Somehow that, for me, connected to integrative community therapy, a way to give people and give people voice, right? A way to give people voice. Because if we're just sitting and meditating, we don't know what's going on inside each other. We don't know how people are managing. We don't, it's a black box and, from the meditation instructor point of view. So I really was craving something more relational, something that was more about hearing everyone's voice and something that was more about just bringing out the difficulty and working together to find solutions. So I think awaken, this is the longest answer to your simple question. I think in our trajectory is what other modalities complement and support what we are already or have already been doing to have a more complete system of healing for people. That's my vision for what's next.
Beautiful. Okay. And I really am glad that this relational piece came up because that's always been so important to our work, right? There's this image of meditation as a thing you do alone, but I've always appreciated about Awaken that it is about mindful connections. So I heard you highlight there that we need one another to help us see what we're not seeing. There's a lot of nuance in practice. There's a lot of discernment in practice. So being in community helps us to be true to ourselves and open to what we might not be seeing. Um, it it also allows us to be, I think, the full humans we want to be, right? That we can't be full humans on our own, that being in community is challenging. That's where we see the stuff that we need to work on. And then with integrative community therapy, adding that, like really inviting our voices, inviting that reflection and that sharing with one another. So thank you for naming that and bringing in the trauma piece and it makes so much sense that if we're practicing and we're looking inward, we will always be evolving because there's always more that's unfolding in community. So I just want to end by thanking you, Stepahnie, for taking that leap of faith, for creating this community, and for inviting us all along with you.
Yeah. Well, I feel so much gratitude for you, Dawn, being in this journey with me. So, just for people listening, I couldn't do this without you. You have been just such a huge support for me in your role as program coordinator, but also you have brought so much grace and insight and just beautiful ability to hold space for difficulties. Speaking of that, as we have tried to make all kinds of things happen and deal with all the human beings. Yeah.
Thank you. Now here's to another 10 years and beyond of this beautiful work.
Absolutely.